Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend! What a weekend we had. Everybody, I think, globally focused on one place, and that would be what's going on in Ukraine. And I'll be honest. You know, I'm looking at the globe coming together. And, well, I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the fact that a good majority of the globe can come together. And this, to me, is why you have organizations like NATO and the UN and why you want people joining together, fighting for freedom, fighting for democracy. Good thing. Now, here at home, seeing a little bit of it as well. Seeing a little bit of coming. Sure, you can have your fringe. You got on both sides the extremes. You're going to have the Trumpkins and you're going to have the Lulus. They're going to be out there, but, somewhat coming together as a country. In fact, some interesting polling numbers out. 74% of the U.S. people polled here at home said that what's going on in Ukraine is not justified. 76% view Vladimir Putin as unfavorable in what he's doing, and you go, yeah, those seem like no-brainers. In fact, you should seem that it would be higher than that. But given the fact that we're as split as we are, I'll take that. Now, given the fact that just 3% of Trump voters, 3%, think that Biden is doing a better job leading the country than Putin is, and given the fact that I really don't think Putin gamed this out happening the way it's happened. I got to tell you, we're going to go right there. I thought he saw this going differently in his head. I really think he thought this was going to be a quick weekend in, quick weekend out, home, big parade, love, flowers, all that. Has not worked out that well. Now, 47% of Trump voters say that Putin's actually doing a better job than Biden, even though the Russian economy is on the way to total collapse because everything's being shut off. 45% say that neither Putin or Biden are doing well. And this is the part that gets me. I don't know how you can look at this scenario and go, oh no, Vlad's doing well. 95% of Trump voters view what Biden is doing unfavorably. And you go, okay, well, it is what it is. 87% view what Biden is doing as very unfavorable. Now, in getting into what's going into Ukraine, and I've gotten a lot of crazy. It seems like the crazy comes out during these moments, and that's okay because we need to have these conversations. The 26% who say we should have nothing to do with it, no stake, we've got no stake in it, shouldn't do anything. Those are the 26% who filled up my email box. Those were the folks who were going, no, what would you do here? What would you do there? Understand, I grew up understanding that NATO was, well, first it was put into place to hold the Soviet Union in check, did not want communism spreading, wanted to hold on to democracy. But also the other part of NATO's mission was to make sure that you didn't have nationalist military buildups like you had in Germany. That's not great either. So that you didn't have this kind of hyper-nationalist militarism that would, again, sweep across and cause more wars. The idea is the more friendly we are, the more we're on the same page, the more we agree, the more we defend each other, the better, and the more politically aligned everyone is, the better. So when everyone say, well, NATO should have been shut down after the Soviet, no, that was part of their mission. But the other part of it was to make sure that you didn't have the rise of the other side either. And I think it's done a pretty good job of that. And to make it so that you didn't have these kind of wars, that all of us come together in times of crisis and say, no, we're not going to allow this. I'll defend you, you defend me. This way we're all more secure. And I had a bunch of people going, but how would you like it? If Russia signed an agreement with Cuba. Well, they did. That they have one. If we attack Cuba, they may jump in the middle of it. Now understand, this is where this argument breaks down for me. Ukraine is a country moving towards democracy. They want to be free. They want to move in a direction. They don't want to be part of Russia. They don't want to be part of really didn't want to be part of the EU until today, where you've got, Zelensky going, hey, now we're ready to come over. We're moving in that direction. They wanted to be a free country. And as soon as Putin started doing these things he's been doing, now they've got to go, which way do we go? Did the U.S. scream too much when Putin basically took over Belarus? Oh, I know, he didn't take it over. They agreed to with each other. They have a mutual defense pact. In fact, the Belarus military is now invading Ukraine. That was on the Ukraine border. That's on the border of other NATO countries. So this argument that I keep getting, and I'm getting all this crazy stuff that we shouldn't be there for this reason, we shouldn't be there for this reason. Understand, the criminal in this is Vladimir Putin. Nobody wants this. Nobody. The criminal in this, the rich guy who was sending poor and working class Russian kids into Ukraine to kill people, other poor and working class people, is Vladimir Putin. This is his baby. He owns this. And I don't care what Ted Cruz is out there saying that, Europe's on the verge of war because of Joe Biden. This isn't Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden has done everything an American president could do right now. He's done everything. In fact, he's pulled the world together better than I thought could possibly be done. And yet you have in this poll 67% of Trump of Trump voters going, yeah, he's not tough enough. Well, how much tougher are you going to get? Because nobody wants to put boots on the ground. Nobody wants to bomb the 40-mile-long Russian military train that's coming in full of soldiers and armament. Nobody wants to bomb that. Nobody wants World War III, but the majority of us say we should be supporting the Ukrainians. Get them the military armaments they need, get them the support they need, sanctions, do what we can, but the fight ultimately is with the Ukrainian people having to defend their country and their freedom. Now, having said that, the other side, and I get this from the left in a huge way, and look, I'm not somebody who believes in starting a war. I'm not a war person, but I'm also not a pacifist. I have been in a fight or two in my lifetime. The reality is, you have two choices in these moments. The Ukrainian people have two choices. They can surrender, as some are saying they should do. Some American military types. And I look at this Colonel. Colonel Doug McGregor was on Trey Gowdy's Fox TV show. And again, am I surprised this is what's coming from Fox? No, but this is what the Colonel had to say.
In our usual effort to demonize him and his country, we need to remember that Ukraine is fourth from the bottom of 158 countries in the world as corrupt. Russia is perhaps 3 or 4 places above them. This is not the liberal democracy, the shining example that everyone says it is. Far from it. Mr. Zelensky has jailed journalists and his political opposition. I think we need to stay out of it. The American people think we should stay out of it. The Europeans think we should stay out of it. And we should stop shipping weapons and encouraging Ukrainians to die in what is a hopeless endeavor.
So when you say stay out of it, you mean no sanctions, no military aid, just let Russia take the portion of Ukraine they want to take?
Yes, absolutely. I see no reason why we should fight with the Russians over something that they have been talking about for years. We simply chose to ignore it. And more important, the population there is indistinguishable from their own.
The population is indistinguishable. And that's the weird thing, because it's true. They have a common language. But you heard them. And this has been the right-wing line for a while. We should stay out of it. None of our business, except the expansion of a Russian state. Because once Ukraine goes, then what? Then do we find other NATO-aligned countries? And do we wait for that as they grow stronger? And is that the goal? The other part that I found interesting about the Colonel's statement is it's hopeless. Well, I don't think you should tell that to the Ukrainian people. They don't seem to think it's hopeless. They are fighting for their freedom. And now this is coming on the channel that talks about freedom. This is the channel that talks about liberty. This is the channel that pumps up all those so-called patriots driving their trucks, because they want freedom. Yet you want to talk about freedom fighters. Yeah, is it overwhelming? Yeah, I got to tell you, I didn't think the Ukraine would hold on this long. I didn't think the Ukrainian people would hold out this long. I thought the Russian military would shock and awe them, and they've been bombarding them. But these are people who will stand up and fight. Now, on the left, I got people saying, well, would you say this about those African countries? Implying that I'm being racist. And look, there is some part of racism in this a little bit, I'm sure. That these are white people who are fighting each other, and yeah, we got to get in the middle of this. But for me, it's not that at all. For me, it's our interests, our security interests. I view Vladimir Putin as somebody who wants to rebuild the old Soviet Union, wants to bring back that kind of power and re-engage the world as, well, the superpower that he remembers them being. That is bad for democracy. That is bad for global security. And in this moment, you have to stand up to the bully. And the world is doing that. The part that I love is everyone saying, well, Biden's not tough enough. I don't want Biden to be tough enough. I want the world to stand up as they are doing, and doing in a big way. Now, what's interesting, things are not going well. Things not going well at all, because you now have two Russian oligarchs, this Mikhail Friedman and Oleg Deripaska, who have basically broken ranks with the Kremlin and calling for an end immediately to the Russian war in Ukraine, which I think is wow. And I think that has a little bit to do with the fact that right now, and I love this image, there's no image funnier in this moment. I know there's nothing funny about war, but there's nothing funnier than billionaires racing to their yachts as the repo man shows up to tow them away. Because right now, we're going after their assets. And one of the things that they're going after, these $100 million, $500 million yachts that they can then sell and maybe fund the rebuilding of Ukraine. So they're all racing to their yachts. They're all racing to get out into water so the repo man can't come and take them. I mean, it would seem like almost, and this, again, not a funny moment, but it would be funny to watch. It just is what it is. Now, it's bad. The world is coming together when Switzerland has jumped in and said that they're going to freeze Russian assets, completely pushing aside that neutrality thing and saying, nope, we're going to join with the rest of the world in freezing, making this painful for the wealthy in Russia, to put pressure on Putin to stop this. That, to me, right there is one of those things where you go, wow, I never thought that had happened. The Swiss they've been neutral for always. But here we are. The shipping container company Maersk, they are suspending container shipments to Russia. Basically, everything is kind of stopping. Now, what's interesting to me is we're going to start seeing the Republicans pivot. It's going to happen. We've already seen Trump kind of turn. We've already seen his turn that go, well, NATO wouldn't be this strong if it weren't for me. If it weren't for me trying to destroy it, if it weren't for me trying to tear NATO apart, you know, if I didn't act swiftly and strongly, there wouldn't be a NATO. There'd be no NATO. Except he said that he was gonna break us out of that. He was going to cut our alliance with NATO if he was elected again. But again, no reality world. And I'm waiting for the Tucker Carlsons and the rest of them who have just said some really dumb stuff to come out and oh no, I was always against it. Chris Christie has come out. He slammed Trump for praising Putin, saying that no walking that back, history is watching. Yeah, you don't get to say Putin's a genius and he's savvy and he's smart. You don't get to praise him and then say, oh, well, if it weren't for me. You don't get that. And again, we're going to watch as the right-wing mouthpieces, because I listened to a talking head this morning as I was driving to a doctor appointment, go on and on about how, Republicans believe in freedom and how they're now with the Ukrainians and how just like they were with the people during the civil rights movement. And I'm going, what? Did I miss something? And how they were with, everyone, women, and letting them vote, and how, they were all on board with all of these things and all of these fights throughout history. They were all on the right side of every fight for freedom in history, according to this guy. And, I guess his minions will believe it. What I'm interested to see is, a lot of these people, they've been on the Putin side for a bit. When that pivot happens, does the faithful continue to buy it? And that's the weird part in all this. Do they continue to buy it? And I fear that they will. Because, they've never shown any interest in not. For instance, I heard one of them say that it was because of Donald Trump that Ukraine has the tank busters and the weapons that they have. And he was very proud of this, very, very proud of the fact that, Donald Trump did this work. Donald Trump was, instrumental in doing this, without bothering to mention the fact that the resources that went into getting those things to them came with the quid pro quo perfect phone call. Didn't mention that. Didn't bother mentioning that Congress had already, decided on this before he was president. This was a continuation. He just had to sign off on it. And never mind the fact that Trump and his minions were, again, trying to extract their pound of flesh. Was it dirt on Biden? Probably. Was it something financial? I wouldn't doubt it. But now they want to rewrite history. And I find it interesting that, the minions, the Tucker Carlson crowd, they're the ones out there raising the stink because they think they know something. And I saw this tweet by New Jersey Representative Tom Malonsky. Tom tweeted out, he said, "My office is now getting calls from folks who say they watch Tucker Carlson, are upset that we're not siding with Russia in its threats to invade Ukraine, and who want me to support Russia and their reasonable positions." But you got Josh Hawley who's saying we should stay out of it. Stay out of it. We shouldn't be the world's policeman. And I've heard this a lot. We shouldn't be the world's policeman. And on an immediate level, I'm going, yeah, I don't know that I don't want us to be the world's policeman. And I go, yeah, I think we shouldn't be the world's policeman until I go, okay, we pull out, we leave a giant void. Who am I then comfortable with filling that void? Now remember, I'm not somebody who wants to start wars. I'm not somebody who wants to fight. But I do ask the question of how do we stop fights? So if we pull out of all these places and we are no longer the world's policeman, who will be? Who are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with Putin doing that? China? Because we don't live in a world where no one will do it. We live in a world where somebody will. And look, for all the things we've done wrong, and Lord knows we have done a lot wrong. For all the things we didn't get right, all the things we did wrong, for all the things we screwed up, absolutely. I don't think I want anyone else in that position. That simple. Now, Steve Bannon, he's saying that his minions are saying, well, it's that Greta Thunberg. That's her fault because of the green stuff. Ron Johnson blamed Alexander Vindman, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, because, well, the perfect phone call was perfect after all. And, you know, Donald Trump didn't actually get anything out of it except impeached. And I look at this and I go, you know, how do we stop that? And then the sane part of me steps in. You got to ignore them. They're the fives. You're always going to have fives. You're always going to have extremists. You're always going to have people on the fringe. You let it go. Let the fives go. You got to work where you can do the work. And fortunately, the rest of the world seems to be moving in the right direction. And even in sports, the Russian Grand Prix has been canceled. The Formula One folks said, sorry, we're out. The soccer people, FIFA, I don't know much about soccer, but FIFA, they have decided no more Russia in the World Cup. They've ejected Russia from qualifying for the World Cup there. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, they recommended banning all Russian and Belarusian athletes from any international competitions. World Rugby people have sanctioned Russia and Belarus. This is what happens when the world comes together. And why? Because this is very clear cut. There is one guy, and I started with this and I'm going to end with it. There is one guy, one extremely wealthy, probably the wealthiest man in the world, one extremely wealthy guy who is sending poor and working class Russian kids into a neighboring country to kill other poor and working class kids. And not just kids, 18 to 80, they're taking everybody. That's wrong. And that's what unites us. And this is where someone came to me and said, well, why don't we, if NATO is so great, why don't we let Russia come into NATO? I go, well, if Russia would abide by what NATO stands for, then yeah, I have no problem with that. The problem is they won't. And they didn't apply. Now, for all those who are saying that, well, Russia's doing this because of NATO, Ukraine filed its application back in 2008. That's a long time ago. Still haven't been put in it. So, again, it seems to me all of these false claims, like the Nazis, look, you got extremists in every country. There are Nazis everywhere. NATO's going to expand. All of this stuff seems like, just convenient. When the reality is, he just wants to rob and pillage. He just wants to steal. I got lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. Right back with Will Bunch, national columnist over at the Philadelphia Daily and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Stick around. Right back.
Indigenous people have been saying that we feel a shift in the climate for decades. Climate change is here. The time is now to pass the torch on to the next generation of clean energy warriors. We need to put the land back to work for our people. That means creating jobs for them to live and thrive in our communities. The time is now. Congress must invest in clean energy.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, quote of the day. Actually, we'll throw out two quotes of the day. Howard Stern said, "I voted for many Republicans. I don't see how I could ever go back to that." And look, I don't know how you do that either in this day, especially looking at some of the positions they've taken. And Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell came out and said there's no place in the Republican Party for white supremacists and anti-Semitism. I got to tell you, I thought that was all that what the Republican Party is. But hey, evidently there's no place, so I guess there's going to be nobody left. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine and here at home with some of the insanity that we've been seeing. I've asked our good friend Will Bunch to come talk with us. Will is the national columnist for the Philly Daily News. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man.
So, we're in this moment where, I asked the question a number of times. How did the Republican Party go from that party of Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, to the Russian leader is smart, genius, savvy. We should do nothing. We should stay out of anything. We should let them just roll over Ukraine. How did that happen?
I think it's a party that just admires and just loves this strongman concept. Not that I think in the real world either Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin are really that strong, but that the image they portray of the strongman. I mean, I think some of it ties into the increasingly strong, Christian fundamentalist streak in the Republican Party, because there have been a lot of surveys that, people with that worldview tend to also have an authoritarian worldview, and they look at somebody like a Putin and they see him as standing up for his country and his country's traditional values, standing up against things like LGBTQ rights, which to them is strength, which is unfortunate. Somebody who portrays a macho image, who would never would never say what his pronouns are, that are the kind of things that drive the right crazy nowadays. And so there's an admiration, and at one point they had the restraint to at least temper that by saying, well, but he's a dictator or whatever. But I think it got to a point where no, we just admire. We'd rather have a strong leader like Putin than somebody that they claim is weak like Biden, which is, I mean, the last week has shown the absurdity of that whole view, has it not? I mean, I think Biden, he's not perfect, but I think on this issue, he's shown tremendous strength in rallying allies, getting countries like Germany that had some reluctance, getting them on board, and forming this united front. And look at the way the world is united against Russia and in favor of Ukraine. And Joe Biden is the guy who took the lead on that. He's clearly, I think, kind of first among equals in that coalition. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Whereas, Putin, this strongman that people on the right admired, went into Ukraine. He clearly had no plan in any sense. He had no plan to win the war. He had no plan to deal with these crippling economic sanctions that are really hitting this country hard. And he increasingly looks like somebody who's just detached from reality.
Yeah, and if you saw the picture of him in the boardroom, he's like 40 feet away from everybody else. And the first thing that goes into my head is, yeah, he may be afraid of COVID, but I think he's more afraid of oligarchs, sending some airborne poisons his way, as has been accused. He has been accused of doing in the past. Yeah,
projecting, right? I mean, he probably doesn't want to. He probably doesn't want to stand near the window any more than his enemies want to stand near the window at this point. And through history, leaders like him, especially in Russia, but around the world, people with his portfolio have often met a bitter end. He certainly has all the signs of paranoia. I mean, the long table thing is just bizarre. And it may be a case where we're seeing for the first time. We've talked so much in the last 2 years about how COVID has affected our mental health. Well, here's somebody whose mental health may have been affected by the isolation and the the anxieties and the paranoia of the COVID age, and he's somebody with a nuclear arsenal, which is just scary, right?
Yeah.
So,
now you have a new piece out that I think is incredibly important, and I've been saying for the longest time that this election cycle for Democrats, and this is even before Putin invaded Ukraine, I've been saying the issue here is, are you in favor of democracy or are you not? Do you believe in the rule of law or don't you? This is kind of that moment. Do you believe in democracy? Do you believe in freedom as we understand it, or don't you? And we're seeing that still kind of playing out in some of the rhetoric that's going around today.
Yeah, what's interesting is, I've been making that argument for months, before we knew that Putin was going to go into Ukraine, and to me, I saw it being framed around issues like the book banning that's going on in so many of our schools and so many libraries around the country. The thing is, the vast middle, the voters that are always being competed for in these elections, most middle Americans, or whatever you want to call them, don't support banning books. I've seen many polls, I've seen focus groups. They disapprove of that kind of censorship. The reality is, most Americans want their kids to learn about subjects like racism. Particularly, when you have these bans which would really prohibit teachers from talking about Martin Luther King or talking about Rosa Parks or people that are just widely accepted as kind of heroic icons of the civil rights movement. I think the average voter in the middle is actually offended by that. And I've urged the Democrats, in fact, I've been thinking about doing this, and I probably will do this in a column someday. I may just write the ad for the Democrats of what they need to say, because they can go on TV and, you can have an ad showing Martin Luther King saying the quote that even conservatives love from him about being judged by the content of your character rather than the color of your skin. And then you come back and say, your Republican governor wants to pass a law that would prevent your kid from learning about that in school. I think it's really powerful. And, and now, like you said, with this Ukraine situation, as I wrote in my column over the weekend, it's a time for choosing. Are you on the side of democracy, or are you, like the Donald Trumps and the Tucker Carlsons of the world? Are you on the side of decadence, basically? How can you look at these images coming out of Ukraine of elderly men kneeling in front of tanks? These newlyweds who took up rifles on their honeymoon, sped up their wedding and went online and got rifles to defend Kiev. Just everyday people, teachers and accountants walking down the streets in patrols, having these events where they mix up Molotov cocktails. I don't celebrate violence, but you have to celebrate people defending their country against these invaders, because they're really defending democracy. This is not, sometimes in war it can be ambiguous, right? That both countries are kind of bad. They both have dictators, or neither country is really that democratic. That's not the case here. Vladimir Zelensky was elected just like Joe Biden was elected, in a vote of the people. He's an unlikely president who's risen to the occasion. And, you have this country in Russia that is a fake democracy, where the elections are rigged for Putin, where people who threaten to challenge Putin are thrown in jail or unfortunately murdered, like, his main rival was murdered 10 years ago, right near the Kremlin, or they're thrown in jail. And the choice couldn't be any more stark.
Yeah.
And I think, I think something like that's so cut and dried. I think for Americans who maybe are getting lost in the day-to-day and not seeing the big picture of what's happening in this country, maybe they should realize that we have to defend democracy on our soil. You have a political party that's trying to curtail voting rights. You have a political party that's trying to censor what kids can read and what teachers can say in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fights out there. There really are. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Will Bunch. Will's a national columnist for the Philly Daily News, and then the Philadelphia Inquirer. If you want to take a look at the work that he does, we'll get links out on social media on how you can see the great stuff that he does. Also, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast, take the program on the go wherever you go. Now, Will, we're talking about freedom, and we're in this moment where, all I hear on right-wing radio and on that Fox channel over there is about this big freedom rally. You got these truckers who are there. Their freedom's been impeded upon. Someone made them wear a mask or protect themselves. I guess there's part of me that goes, what really is the definition of freedom when you're comparing people who are fighting for their lives in a place like Ukraine, or people who are just whining and complaining, who have always had such privilege? It doesn't seem like they both match. Or am I just being divisive?
No, they don't. I think I think the Ukraine example, it's people fighting for the right to choose their own government, for the right to speak out, for the right to live when they're being invaded by Russians. And like you said, I mean, these convoys, and I mean it's funny how all of a sudden you've heard so little about convoys. Well, you've heard about Russian convoys, but these trucker convoys, you've heard so little about them in the last 5 days. Now that something that really matters is happening out there, I think it's just made these trucker convoys look really small. But like you said, I mean, I think the freedom they're fighting for, I think they're confusing privilege for freedom. I mean, you're talking about the freedom to oppress people. What's the freedom in not wearing a mask? Freedom to possibly infect other people with the disease. And many of these alleged threats to freedom aren't even real. I mean, certainly in the United States, I mean, there's virtually no mandates. There's very few vaccine mandates, just for some civic employees and healthcare workers, but not that many. There's we've seen most of the mask mandates disappear. So what are these people protesting? I think it's just an attitude. It's all part
of the grievance tour, because you got to have something to complain about. Right. It's Angry Old White Guy Grievance Tour 2022. That's really what it really is all about. And when you put it to the backdrop of these people who are under attack and are fighting for their lives, especially as you see the images of this 40 mile long convoy of military armament and soldiers, bearing down on the capital city there's a whole different kind of worldview.
That's a convoy that's taken away people's freedoms. I mean, and it kind of speaks to brute force and what brute force can do and what it's all about. Whereas freedom is really the power of individual choice. These individuals in Ukraine have to make incredible choices right now, whether they want to stay and defend their country or whether they want to try and flee to a neighboring country like Poland. And these are existential choices, and people, freedom for people is just the freedom to make those kinds of choices,
right.
And the convoy is in their case, this 40-mile convoy of people with guns is what's threatening their freedom. And I think, again, I mean, it just shows us what all this is really all about.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Will Bunch. Will is a national opinion columnist over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I got it wrong before. It's the Inquirer. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look.
It's complicated. You don't want a 5-minute.
I don't, and I just saw it. I'm going to go with the Inquirer for that one.
Inquirer, but we brand it all as the Inquirer these days. So. But God bless the Daily News.
There you go. I just happened to see that. So if you got a thought, question, comment, something you want to ask Will, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Will, I've been getting a lot of people attacking my position. And from the very beginning, my position was extremely clear. I have not moved one bit. Putin is a rich guy with a lot of power who is looking to send poor and working class Russian kids into Ukraine to kill poor and working class people there for whatever his reasons are. A big part of it is theft, about more power and more influence and more wealth for him and his oligarch buddies. That for me has never changed. He is the giant a-hole in this situation, and everything we can do to push back on that guy for me is the right direction. But I'm then getting all of the other stuff. Well, NATO was never meant to last past the Warsaw Pact. It was supposed to be broken up after the fall of the Soviet Union, which is not true, I found out. Also there as well, it's, how would you like it if Russia had an agreement with Cuba? Well, they do. So I look at all of these other arguments as deflections and almost as justifying what Putin is doing. So in that vein, I view those people as supporting Putin.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. I mean, look, I think there actually is, and I have to confess, I haven't followed it until recently as closely as I should. But I mean, there's a conversation to be had about NATO and what its purpose is and how big it should be. I mean, Tom Friedman of all people, had a piece the other day questioning whether NATO really needed to keep expanding once the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. And I do believe generally, whatever you think about NATO, I do wish we had done more to truly encourage real democracy in Russia during those critical first 10 or 15 years before Putin really took hold.
Right. Instead of allowing Wall Street and the wealthy to steal, rob, and cheat the Russian people out of all of the wealth that they've pocketed. I'm right there with you.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, instead of teaching them to be a democracy, I think we went over there and taught them how to be a kleptocracy, and we taught them how to create billionaire oligarchs in their country, just like we created billionaire oligarchs in our country. And it's truly unfortunate. And I think it's an opportunity that's lost because, the Russian people are like the people in most countries. Most of them want freedom. Most of them want to be able to elect their government and be able to, move about freely and do the things they want to do. And they've been saddled back into a different kind of czar than the czars that they had for centuries before this, and it's quite unfortunate. But I mean, your broader point about Putin, I couldn't agree more. I mean, don't forget, Rick. I mean, I'm a journalist, and this is a guy who has killed dozens of journalists just for doing their job. Yep. I mean, to me, that's kind of I don't want to sound like I'm self-centered that I judge. I mean, there's a lot of things I would judge a leader by. But for me, that's kind of a litmus test, the fact that this guy, the journalists who are critical of him aren't just ostracized, they get thrown out of windows, I mean, and just like people who dissent against his government. I mean, when you think back on all the things this guy has gotten away with over the years, poisoning his enemies even when they're on foreign soil. I mean, there was a guy, I think it was the guy who was the founder of RT or somebody who was an insider who was murdered here in Washington, D.C. in his hotel room. The reach of his thugs has extended all over the world. And, you can't justify that. I've always argued for a U.S. foreign policy that was less militaristic and more built around peace. And,
me too. Look, Will, I'm as anti-war as anybody. Don't want to fight anybody. But there is a moment where you go, once someone punches you in the mouth, you got to either you respond or you get away. This is a moment where the world has stepped together. And this isn't just the U.S. It's just not me. It's not you. This is the world coming together, telling this one guy, this one rich guy who is sending his citizens, his young kids and young working class citizens into another country to kill and to be killed. This is all on him. And for me, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, there's no on one hand, on the other hand here. There's only one bad guy in this situation, and you're right. And I mean, what's fascinating is, I think we all agree. Anybody who knows the history of World War II, for example, knows that no matter how peace-loving your people are, there are moments when you need to find ways to rally together and stop aggression. And what's fascinating to see in this situation so far is you're seeing an effort to stop Putin's aggression, but also trying not to start World War III. And so far, so good, right? I mean, you've seen an unprecedented effort to use tools like economic sanctions to try and stop him, to try and get arms to the Ukrainian people, but without sending U.S. troops or NATO troops into the country. And that's good so far. And so far, Putin's invasion has not succeeded on the level he thought it would succeed. So far things are going well. I mean, obviously it's a fluid situation. Like you said, you still have this massive column of tanks moving through the country, and they seem to have stepped up their bombing of civilian targets, which is horrific. And we don't know how all this is going to play out. But I think right now trying to use every tool at our disposal to stop Putin and stop his aggression, but yet also try and prevent World War III is the way to go for now. And so far, I can't criticize our government or our allies for anything they've done so far in this situation.
Yeah, I think Joe Biden has done absolutely everything that any president would have done, with the exception of the last guy. No idea what the last guy would have done. I do know what has been reported, that he said he was going to try and get us out of NATO, even though now he's taking credit because, hey, if it weren't for him, NATO wouldn't be this strong. Thank goodness NATO's there because of Donald Trump is the pivot. So my last question is, all of these mouthpieces who are now, yesterday were, pro-Putin, anti-Biden, us being involved. When that pivot happens, do you think the American people will buy it?
I don't know. I'm interested to see. I mean, I would love to think that the Democrats can go out there and say, they've got these statements on tape, use them against some of their opponents and say, I've always been on the side of democracy. Here's what your guy said 6 months ago and whatever. What I don't know is, historically, American voters have not cared as much about foreign policy, and I mean, that's why, in my column, that's why I argue, let's reframe this a little bit. This isn't just conventional foreign policy in my book. This is a fight for democracy that is happening in Ukraine, but it's also happening in the United States at the same time. And I think if you can link those two things, like I said, if you can link people fighting for freedom in Ukraine with, people fighting for the freedom to read and the freedom to learn here in America, and the freedom to vote, against all this voter suppression, I think that's the linkage you want to make. And I think that's a winning formula for the Democrats or anybody who can make that argument.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mark me on Team Freedom. Whatever we have to do to keep and maintain our ability to be free and to help others achieve that, I am right there. But Will, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As always, great stuff. I hope folks will check out your work. We'll get links out on social media. I can check out the Philly Inquirer articles that you put out. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Good
stuff, as always. Like I said, our good friend Will Bunch. Look, at the end of this, it's simple. Like I said, like we talked about, it is completely, it's simple. There's one guy. One guy's doing this. One. That's Vladimir Putin. He can end this tomorrow. He can turn those tanks around. He can take all those kids, those poor and working class kids that he signed up to go and slaughter people in another country, and he can take them home. And this could stop. Then you want to sit down, you want to negotiate, then you want to talk about NATO expansion, then you want to talk about the other stuff. That's another day. But as long as the aggression is happening, the world cannot allow it to continue. And as I said, Joe Biden gets credit for this. He pulled this globe together in a way that nobody else could. I truly believe that. To get the Germans to say, you know what, we're going to shut off that pipeline in winter when they desperately need that energy. To get Switzerland. I mean, I'm literally stunned by that. To get Switzerland, who is always neutral and never lets anybody into their banking world, say we're going to start freezing Russian assets. That's huge. That means the oligarchs are not just scrambling to save their yachts from the repo man. They're heading to the local bank to salvage what little they can grab before Uncle Sam and the rest of the world grabs a hold of it to pay reparations for the damage that Putin's doing. And at some point, I think Putin's got to worry. There may be a window in his future. There may be indeed. Anyway, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Take the program on the go. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Also, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show for working people.
It doesn't happen like we think it does. No one rolls the tanks. No armies meet in pitched battle. It happens quietly, little by little. And because so many think it can't happen, it does happen. Little by little, the rules change. It doesn't seem shocking or sudden. And that's the point. Fewer places to vote, longer lines. Don't worry, they say. We're just improving the system. They hope we won't notice the rules are changing because they lost the last election. They hope we just won't care enough to stop them. They believe they can take America away from us, and we won't even notice. We know who they are. We know what they want. The question is, who are we? Do we let them get away with it, or do we fight? Democracy is on the ballot. Vote while your vote still counts. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Politics is about the art of what's possible. It's about getting stuff done. I mean, for me, that's the answer. It's about getting things done. And this was the argument we had back before on, tying Build Back Better to the infrastructure bill, which at the beginning, full disclosure, I was in favor of. Okay, for the short term, let's hold these, because the second you get the infrastructure bill that everybody agrees on, as soon as you get that, the other one's dead. Everyone knew that. So for me, it was about leveraging the two of them as long as you could. It was about pushing Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema as far as you could get them, and then take what you could get and run with it. And the sad reality are those who are kicking and screaming and slamming their fists on the table. No, we want it all. Well, guess what? You don't always get it all. And in this vein, not only did we not get it all, we didn't get anything. And until you go, well, the art of possible. Again, this goes back to 8th grade civics classes. This goes back to basic governance. The idea that there's sometimes going to be that ugly 4-letter word of compromise. And yes, I know compromise is more than 4 letters. So don't send me any evil emails. Or do, please, rick at thericksmithshow.com. But, this is one of those things where I come back to, you learn this as a kid. This is how government works. Get what you can get, put it into law, get it moving, get it started, and then you go back, you build a movement to expand it. Build Back Better should have passed 6 months ago. We should be enjoying the fruits of those investments as we speak. But because politically there was that fighting, we want it all, we want more. And look, at the beginning, I was there. At the beginning, I was saying the same thing. Let's get as much as we can. Because we need it. We need massive investment. But you take what you can get. So my fear, and again, you can write this down if you have to. My fear is that on Wednesday morning you wake up and you find that all that's being said is the grievance that comes out of Tlaib's response and the grievance that the media focuses on, and virtually nothing that the president says. For me, the State of the Union is about the president. Hit that message. To step on those toes, to divert that message in any way, not a great idea. And again, it shows a weakness within the Democratic Party. It shows that they're buying what's being said in the media as well. Just my thought Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, by all means, download the podcast. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Share the podcast. Please do. Helps us out. Every click, every download helps us expand our reach, our power, our message. So please, by all means, share. Going to be an interesting week. State of the Union, all the horrible that's going on, the war crimes we're living through in real time in Ukraine, all of that. Well, stuff to get to. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.